And we're up. We're live. Facebook and YouTube. People might be watching. Ah! Hi, Steve. I'm really nervous about today. It's really funny. You put a LinkedIn post going, I'm nervous about being on a podcast. I'm like, I'm nervous about being on a podcast with the podcast guy. And for those listening who don't know this, Steve literally told me just before we came on air that you do basically podcast audits and you can check people's podcasts out. And I'm like, shit, he's literally going to be doing that to me whilst we're doing the podcast. So I'm intrigued. He's got his notebook as well for those listening or watching. So it's really funny to do a podcast with someone who knows about podcasts, because I'm like, God, what's he going to think? So I am intrigued to know what you do think. We will talk about podcasts. You're an ex-BBC man, so you've been in the whole media world, which I'm sure people are going to think is terribly glamorous, and you're probably going to tell us that, well, the people that I've met that are in media have told me that most of the time it's pretty boring. But, let's talk about that. Let's talk about your podcast business, media. You've got property. Are you still doing buy property Airbnbs?
Yeah, so we haven't done Airbnb since the pandemic, but we've got property, so by that we're letting out and stuff like that. So yes, we've got that as well.
So we can have a magical mystery tour into all of it. So thanks for coming on. It's funny how we're connected. So Tanya connected us, and I was like, I know Steve. She went, you really need to speak to Steve. He knows loads about podcasts. I was like, Steve, I know Steve and Marina. So it's really nice to see you again as well, because I haven't seen you for years. We've both since you've had a child, I've had two. Yeah. Life's got busy. The pandemic's happened. Yeah. Now war in Ukraine. It's all a bit crazy.
It really is. First time I ever met you, Alex Louise, you were chopping chicken in my kitchen. I just came home from work one day, and there you were, kind of like, just demonstrating to Marina how best to kind of like how best
butcher a dead chicken.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all comes in. I think of you whenever we do a kind of a Greek barbecue or anything, actually kind of like, so doing kind of souvla cuts, as kind of like of meat and whatever. Going to any butcher in Cardiff and asking for souvla cuts of it's just like, I need to go. We need to go to North London to do it. So it just comes into my head in terms of kind of like, there are people out there that can teach you how to chop a chicken. Come on,
literally. Oh yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's funny how the world works, because knowing you through my chef days, and then that must have been 10 years ago.
A decade ago, yeah, definitely, yeah.
So. And what's really interesting is that we know each other, but we don't know each other. So what I do want to know, and what I'm sure the listeners want to know, which I think is always interesting for people, is to know a little bit about your background, your story, where you've come from, what you've done, all of that world. So I don't know if you want to give me a kind of pit stop tour of who is Steve Austin?
Oh, man. Well, pick an age you want me to start at, and I'll start from there.
When did you leave school? That's my favourite age, because I left at 15, and people go, did you? What? Your life isn't a mess. Surely this is not possible. You must have gone to university. And I go, no, I left school at 15. It sucked. So I like to start there. So did you stay in school? That's always a novelty.
I stayed in school. I did A-levels. So kind of born in Abergavenny, kind of Neville Hall, and then kind of like grew up in Tredegar. So by the time I left school at 18, I'd already pretty much decided what I wanted to do. I'd already done work experience at the local newspaper, to the point where actually I've become the local correspondent, the person writing the parish news for Tredegar, kind of like
brilliant
on a weekly basis. In sixth form, year 13 for those for anybody under the age of 25. Basically I went off and did a week's worth of work experience at what was Red Dragon FM, which is now Capital South Wales, in the newsroom. And basically I turned up there and I had a portfolio. Remember the old days, your certificate, your kind of record of achievement stuff?
The red folder.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it wasn't quite the red folder, but it was a similar type of thing of all of this, kind of laminated paper with all of my clippings from the newspaper, right? And kind of, you know, there was there, and I'd also had a front page in the Gwent Gazette, because I turned up for school one day in sixth form, and there'd been a landslip. So actually, it had rained that hard, and our comprehensive school was built on the site of an old colliery. So and above it was kind of the wreck, the old Tredegar rugby ground. And basically the hill was built on slurry, and it had rained that hard that actually there had been a landslip which had come into the car park of the school. It missed the school by probably, you know, the size of this room, which, you know, is enough, but not, you know, whatever.
But in Wales, after Aberfan and everything, everyone's very, very touchy about this stuff, right?
So you know, we were talking about a front page story, you know, was leading the bulletins and front page story and all of that day. And I, you know, I was just still a student, you know. I turned up there to go to school, but I just took my notepad out and started kind of talking to everybody. And anyway, I was ringing the local newspaper. Next thing I know, I'm the following Tuesday, I've got a, you know, front page story in the local newspaper. Wow. So I take all of this to Red Dragon, kind of like, and it's just like, look, I can write, I can do all of this. So it's just like, well, it looks like you can. Right, here's a load of press releases, off you go, kind of, and do it. And by the end of that week, I was kind of writing bulletin stories and doing different things. And also then at the end of that week, they kind of said to me, what are you doing next week? I said, well, it's half term. It's just like, right, okay, well, we're 3 people down here. Kind of, any chance you could just come in? Yeah, of course I can. Yeah. So kind of come in on the Monday. And as they say, I mean, literally, I'm kind of just in there, kind of in the thick of it, writing stories, whatever. Do you know anything about sports, Steve? Yeah, I love my sport. Fantastic. Okay, here's the sports bullet.
Wow.
I'm not joking. Day 6 at Red Dragon FM, I'm reading the sport on Red Dragon, because there's nobody else that A, knows anything about sport, and B, kind of is it. And I've. How
old are you at this point? You're still like 18.
I'm 17, and 17. I am no, I'm not. I'm 16. I've just literally we're turning 17 kind of at that point. And I've done hospital radio, and I've kind of done bits and bobs, but it's just that all of a sudden I am kind of on Red Dragon because there's a rota crisis. So I always kind of joke whenever I do student talks and whatever, it's just like, my best bit of advice for you, turn up in the middle of a rota crisis and say yes. Because from there your career will fly. So I was flung into it, and that's 30, that'll be 30 years ago, kind of next year, kind of when I so and I went back every holiday, and I then took a gap. I must have been 17 going 18, because it was my second year of uni. I was then kind of I then took a gap year. So actually I kind of spent as much time as I could afford to spend jumping on the bus to Cardiff every day. And originally they kind of like, you know, I did it for nothing. Then I did it for bus fare. And the old editor literally just put his hand in his pocket and give me a £20 note and just said, could you, you know, pay for your bus fare for a week? And then eventually, kind of like when people who worked there got you know, kind of weeks off and whatever, then I got paid, kind of, you know, first time I got paid work to do it. So it'll be 30 years next year since I started kind of, you know, in a radio station with the fader up kind of in front, you know, whatever, which is terrifying.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think it's really, I love stories like that, because people make life so complicated. And actually what you did was, how did you know what you wanted to do? So that's the bit that I haven't asked. How did you, because you said, I just knew what I wanted to do. What was it about that? Can you remember what it was? Like
I was just obsessed with mainly television when I was a kid. I mean, I was, you know, kind of like everybody used to draw when they were kids and stuff like that. But I would spend my time drawing HTV Wales logos and kind of, and BBC blocks, and designing little studios for continuity announcers and stuff. That was what I did. And also it was also that, and I was obsessed by the weather as well. Initially I wanted to be a weatherman.
Wow, okay.
Because I just loved Ian McGaskill and kind of just the whole, to the point where one day I was in, and this goes way back, this goes into infant school. I was kind of drawing clouds and suns and maps of Wales and kind of all of that. And just saw it and kind of said, you should present, you should do, we should do this as a class project and you should present the weather. So I started to present the weather, and then everybody in the class had to, of an afternoon, kind of present the weather for. They all hated me. I mean, it's seriously, it was just like, I was the only kid that wanted to do this, and everybody was like, I hate you, sticking suns up here, kind of like this. But yeah, so I just had the bug from a very, very early age.
And then you followed it. I think that's the key for people listening. It's like, and then you followed it, because so many people, they go and do the thing they think they should do, or what their parents think they should do, and you knew, and you just stuck to it, and you showed up and you gave it a go and did stuff for free. Do you know what? I love that as well. Anyone that ever says to me, oh, I want to whatever, go and do it. I'm like, go and do it for free. Just go and work there for a couple of weeks and follow someone and see if you like it and all of that world.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard because obviously I was in a position where, I mean, particularly with sixth form, when I was coming down to Red Dragon, I was working in a pub, so I was earning enough to cover the money that I was, until they were asking me to come down so much that it was just like, I said to my editor one day, I'm really sorry, I'm just not going to be able to do this next week. And that's when he kind of put his hand in his pocket and kind of just paid for the bus fare. But I mean, I was willing to kind of just to do it. I mean, I remember at the time kind of leaving school, having the gap year, everybody was just thinking kind of, well, you should sign on the dole. And I'm thinking, well, I can't sign on the dole, because then I'd have to go for interviews doing a job that I don't want to do, because I want to get work experience. Therefore, I will never darken your door ever again. And I just thought, well, I'm not that's not an avenue I can take. So I'm going to have to work this out. And, like I said, I mean, I worked a couple of days, one night and 2 nights a week in a bar.
Yeah.
And then kind of did whatever I did there. And it is about following your dream. I mean, I like I said, I was so determined when the first work experience came around when I was 14 that I was going to write. By that point, it was just like, well, I'll be a newspaper journalist then. And the interesting thing is when I got to the office, and I spent 2 weeks in that office, and it was brilliant, because I just sat there. I kind of like all of these people, kind of surrounded by all of these people doing these amazing things. But the thing that struck me more than anything else, they had Radio 1 on all day long. And I fell in love with the radio because of the work experience I did at the newspaper.
Yeah.
It was just like, this is amazing, and so if it hadn't have been for that, I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing now.
Wow. I mean, it is amazing. It makes you, because I did work experience. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And people said, that's how I ended up as a chef. Because the teacher's like, well, if you don't know what you want to do, go and do something in catering. It's an easy job to get. So I was, dishwashing and chambermaiding and waitressing in a small hotel in Cathedral Road. And that was it. I was like, oh, hang on. So they paid me for my work experience and offered me a job. Same kind of, and I was like, this really works. I kind of like this. And then ended up in an Italian restaurant as a pot washer. Then the chef said, chop these for me, do this. And before and then that was it. I was a chef. It's such a powerful experience, isn't it? I think well, for us anyway. Maybe some people have got other stories. Put in the comments, guys, what was your work experience like? But it's huge just to be effectively still a child, although I felt like an adult at 14, going into the world of adults where you're not in school anymore. There's no teacher saying, do this, do that.
I mean, it's interesting because I was kind of surrounded by friends of mine that kind of didn't throw themselves into work experience, and basically took whatever factory wanted something, and then they just sat in the background and kind of like read the, you know, the paper for a fortnight. And I'm just thinking, what a waste. But also, when then later on I was working at the Beeb and kind of when I was doing different things, it was just like, we got to make work experience come alive for people. You know, it's just like, we can't have people just sat there, because this is it, you know. And it's just like, just remember back, and the one, you know, like I said, there's two bits of advice I used to give students. One is turn up in the rota crisis, which was obviously kind of, you know, a bit of a laugh, but the real bit,
it's also true, right? Because it's the same in chef, it's the same in catering. Go and get a job as a pot washer, and the minute a chef doesn't turn up, you're in. So the best way to get into good restaurants is to do that.
Absolutely, but the thing that everybody has to do, you know, and there's two types of people that kind of take that experience. The ones that stick their hands up and say, I can do it, even if it pushes themselves out of their comfort zones, and the ones that don't do that or wait to be asked. And, you know, people are busy, man, shit's going on all the time. So actually, who are you going to remember? If you're a producer or if you're a chef or whatever, you're going to remember the gobby one that says, yeah, I can do that. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll give it a go.
Give it a go.
Yeah, exactly. And therefore, kind of, it's just, you know, these opportunities don't come all that often. So just grab them and run, you know. And I'm always gobsmacked that not everybody does that. I don't know.
Yeah. And then so what happened next? You were doing that, you started working, and then how did you end up at the BBC, and what track did you ultimately end up taking?
So I did. So basically, I took my gap year. I spent pretty much that year in the newsroom at Red Dragon FM in Cardiff. And when I wasn't there, I was doing radio shows at Prince Charles Hospital in Merthyr. So I was doing hospital radio. So I was spending a lot of time writing, being around professionals, but also kind of just a lot of air miles in front of one of these, and kind of, you know, and that helped enormously, to the point where when I left, I kind of said to the program controller at the time, I said, oh, can you do me a favor? I'm off to uni, and I'm looking at some potential radio stations to do some work experience. To do some presenting at. Can you just have a listen to my demo tape? And he listened to my demo tape, and he said, you're an idiot. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'd have given you shifts if you'd have come to me with this demo tape. He said, why didn't you come to me with this demo tape? And he's like, because I didn't think I was good enough. Well, you're an idiot. So I kind of like, I thought, all right, okay, well, I've got something here. The person that I was doing the morning show with on hospital radio, by that point, we basically produced each other's demo tapes. Right. And I produced his demo tape, and he basically got offers from Red Dragon, Galaxy 101, and Swansea Sound at the time. He ended up going to work for Galaxy, which is now Kiss. And basically, in that summer between kind of leaving Cardiff and kind of heading to Brighton, where I went to uni, I was doing weekend overnight shifts, kind of like on Galaxy 101 in Bristol. So I was playing Jamiroquai 3 times a morning, and you know, and all of that. But it was, I mean, that was, you know, that was a dream come true at the time. I mean, not that it's 3 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday thing, but that sense of
that achievement and experience.
Absolutely, I wanted to be a radio presenter, and here I am. When this mic goes live, people across South Wales and the West Country are listening to me. That, you know, but that was amazing. That was an amazing experience. So when I went to university, then I went to University of Sussex. I studied politics. I only went to Brighton for 2 reasons. One, it was by the seaside. And 2, it had a university radio station. And I didn't, I mean, I literally, I looked, you know, did all the things of kind of UCAS and, you know, prospectuses and right? And all of that. But basically, I only did two open days. One was at the University of Sussex in Brighton to look at media studies, and one was at the university in Sussex in Brighton to look at politics. I went to Brighton twice, having made my mind up. This is where I'm going. So I got there and I sought out the radio station, and the degree happened, and it was a 2-1. It was a drinking degree, but basically,
how come you didn't end up doing a media degree? How come you ended up doing politics?
Because there's an air of pragmatism at the back here, which kind of just thought, what if that did, what if things move on, or what if that kind of isn't respected, and all of that. So I just thought, actually, kind of like, there's a bit of
backup plan B type. Yeah.
So it was politics that I did, but I threw myself into the university radio station. I became program controller of the station. We won best station at the Radio 1 Awards, or the Student Radio Awards, as was kind of. I therefore kind of, the prize for that was an hour on Radio 1, and it's just
like gold for what. Yeah, wow.
So again, 3 a.m. in the morning. So it's but I was Zoe Ball's warm-up man for 1 hour once. That's my claim to fame, basically. And the person standing in for the early breakfast show, as in the person that was on after us, was some guy called Chris Moyles, who was just starting his Radio 1 career.
Just some guy. No one knows who he is, right?
So we had a great time there, because we went down to Yaldin House, the old Radio 1 building, a couple of times, once to plan it out and once to record it. They gave us kind of one of the old stalwarts, a guy called Reese, who kind of like he produced Mark and Lard and done all these different things, and basically he kind of just looked after us, and it was, the show was abysmal, frankly, looking back at it now, and I've got a tape somewhere and I've never listened back to it, but I did at one point kind of go da 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 da, and next it's Blur after Newsbeat, and it's just like, there's things that stick in your head that is, I've done that, I've said those words,
and you've been to the studios and you've worked with the people that everyone else works with, and that experience is huge, right?
And the one, the amazing, wonderful thing about Radio 1 is just the fact that actually it's just like, all of a sudden somebody walks into studio, just sifts through a couple of records on the floor, and they get up and it's Joe Wiley, or kind of, John Peel walked past us and kind of like, got introduced, and, it was obviously he didn't want to be there at that particular moment, but, we got introduced to John Peel. After we recorded, we went to the pub, and Reese said to some bloke called Simon, do you want to come to the pub with us? We've just recorded with these students. And it was Simon Mayo. And it was just like, oh my God, I'm living my dream right now. And that was my third year of university. So I was just finishing. And the answer to how I got to the Beeb was all of the people that I'd worked with at Red Dragon in the newsroom, pretty much to a man, had all left Red Dragon and were working for BBC Wales in the newsroom.
Wow. Yeah.
And for those of them that weren't, they had gone to ITV. So it was just kind of like, that was that, back in the day, they were there were proper newsrooms, kind of like 6-7 people. And that was the breeding ground for basically that we know today. Ooh. So Adrian Masters, who's political editor at ITV Wales now, was kind of my mentor, kind of Andrew Jones, who reads the news on Good Morning Britain in Wales, kind of he was the editor. And kind of we were just we were really lucky and kind of got really close. So anyway, I kind of I kept in touch with everybody. They said, oh, you need to write to the Beeb. Anyway, just to finish off on the Radio 1 story. So I also kind of said, I'd love to work here. I mean, I this is what I really want to do. And it's just, no problem. Kind of, work experience, a bit competitive, but we'll get you in. That's no problem at all. Anyway, I didn't hear a thing until the day I got my job at BBC Wales, a full-time job at BBC Wales. I get a phone call from one of the producers at Radio 1 saying, we're just ringing about your work experience and just see whether you want to come in. And it's just like, I can't. I've just got a full-time job in Cardiff. I'm kind of, and it was like a sliding doors moment. It was
Yeah,
just literally kind of had that call come in a fortnight before or whatever.
yeah,
I may have gone there and, you know,
yeah. Who
and
knows?
but it was just that moment where it was just like, I don't believe that, but you know, hey, I did, you know, and like I say, I mean, in terms of getting into BBC Wales, it was about writing to the editor, the news editor in Radio Wales at the time, and I said, you know, da da da, I've worked with all these, you know, worked with those people, kind of like worked at Red Dragon, done all of this, da 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 da, blah blah, and he writes back, and because it was back in the days where you were writing letters to each other.
Yeah, literally.
And it's amazing how old actually I kind of feel sometimes when I'm talking to people. I'm just kind of like, you know, bloody hell. I said to somebody last night, I take Greek once a week, and kind of sat next to the person last week whose birthday it was, and they were 28, and kind of we were talking, you know, in Greek, kind of, you know, are you married? She said, yes, I've been married 4 years. Are you married? Yes, I've been married 14 years. And you could just see her eyes widen, kind of like, and it's just like, I've been married 14 years. I know. Anyway, so I write to the editor and say all this stuff, and it's just like, he writes back and just says, yes, Steve, but you live in Brighton. And quite frankly, that's not going to work for us. So it's just like, okay. So I write back, and it's just like, yes, but my mum lives in Tredegar. I've got friends in Cardiff. I can come, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, gives me a call and says, right, can you come in next Tuesday? You start at 6 in the morning and you finish at 6 in the evening, and we'll see where we get to. And it's just like, okay, that's a shift. And I did. And I did exactly what I'd done 4 years previous to that. And I stuck my hand up and I said, I've done this and I've done that, and I can do this and I can do that. And, you know, and I got on the train the day after to go back to Brighton, and I got a phone call from the producer of the breakfast show, kind of just saying, I've got an armful of shifts for you. Do you want them? And kind of, and it kind of went from there, really. So that was the August of 1998. By the November of 1998, I was offered a full-time researcher's job, and and that was the start of it, basically.
Wow. And then, so you were doing research at that point, loving it, wanting to do more, different, what?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of like, I mean, you know, the job of researcher at in a newsroom is literally, you know, writing links, writing briefs, chasing, you know, putting in phone calls, kind of trying to get guests on the line. So I was kind of speaking to, you know, and you'd work around the clock as well, because I was working on the breakfast show. Sometimes you'd be in at 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes you'd be in at 4 in the afternoon, and you'd work through till 2 in the morning. So you kind of, you know, I was putting in calls kind of like to, you know, members of parliament, to you know, some pretty kind of high up people. And if you and thinking back to those times, there was, you know, we just had the new Labour government in, and we were kind of in a position where I think there was war in Kosovo, and also kind of we were just on the brink of kind of all of the horrendous things that happened at 9/11, and you know, and I was in the newsroom that day, and I saw all of this stuff was going on, and therefore kind of you were just kind of taking it on board and sharpening your skills. I did do some so there was basically, as a researcher, there were two routes then up. One of them was as a producer, and you know, going on to kind of produce programs, or the other one was kind of as a news reader and, you know, bulletin writer and reporter and all of that. And initially, I was kind of funneled into the news reader reporter thing, and that suited me because I'd done a lot of time on microphone and all of that. Interestingly, I never felt comfortable in my own skin as a newsreader, and I think basically they never fed back to me about that, but I would have kind of basically taken that decision if I were that person, because I was just nervous at the thought of the lights gone on and I now have 3 minutes of script to read. It's different when you're, when you're banging out the hits and kind of, here comes kind of da 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 and all of that, and you're coming back after the break. That's different. When it's, 10,000 people have been kind of displaced in a whatever, then you don't want somebody's mumbling and bumbling their way through that. You need somebody to have that inner confidence. And I never really kind of had that. There was one morning where I read the news at 9 o'clock and I was so intense on practicing that kind of thing. I got direction from studio saying, okay, so we're just playing the song here, so the presenter's not coming to you, so you just pick up after the song fades. And it's, yeah, fine, whatever. So I'm practicing the bulletin. Anyway, the song fades. I was expecting the presenter because I tuned out, and it was just like, shit, I'm halfway down this bulletin, and now there's dead air, and now I'm meant to be pressing. So it's just like,
yeah.
BBC Radio Wales News, it's 7.5 seconds past 9, and I'm kind of just like, oh no, this is awful. And the thing with the news booth back in those days is that actually there was a window at the front, and in front of that window was the news editor's office. So if you ever, when you're reading the news, saw the chair swivel, you just thought, oh shit, I'm in trouble now. And I'm kind of like, I just had one of them. So thankfully, when I was funneled into the kind of like the production field, I felt, I
found your home.
Do you know what? And yeah, it really was my home. And I'd never have thought that was the way I was going to go. But if I could do one thing for the rest of my life, right? That just like money, no object, kind of just whatever. I would be in studio on the other side of glass from presenters, live, keeping a program on air, because it is the best job on earth. And I'm lucky enough to do that now every Sunday morning through the summer with Colin Jackson and Suzanne Packer on Radio Wales, and it's just the best job in the world, because you get all of the kind of the intensity of kind of you've got to keep these plates spinning, but none of the I've got to talk into a microphone and all of that kind of I wasn't necessarily built for it, turns out. But
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think everyone, it's that finding our place where we're happy. I remember I had a few years where I really struggled with, so I do public speaking, I'll show up and do talks. I can do this podcast fairly easily. And actually it's not my natural place, ironically, right? It's a bit like when you were just saying that, I was like, yeah, I totally get that. And I was actually in a personal development seminar years and years ago, a Tony Robbins offshoot with the Yes Group. And we were doing profiling, so like personality profiling. And I didn't do the actual exercise, because basically a couple of people in the room went, oh, that's really easy. You're obviously a star profile, which is people who love being on stage and just like being on stage, basically for the sake of being on stage. They'll have their passion that they're about, but they love the being on stage. So I was like, oh, right, okay, yeah, because I'm just naturally extrovert. I'm happy to mess around and make a fool of myself, all of that. And it actually hampered me for years, because I thought that's what I was. And when I actually do speak, I find it really exhausting. Like once I've done it, I'm knackered. I'm really done. It doesn't fill me with energy. I do get a bit nervous prior. And when I actually did the personality profiling, my profile is a deal maker. And if speaking helps me make a deal, in the sense of, the deal maker profile is networking, putting people together, solving problems, all of that world, if speaking is part of that, I'll do it. And as soon as I knew that and understood it, I was like, oh, thank God for that.
Yeah.
I thought I was supposed to be this person that's always, on stage and speaking and all of that. And then I was like, oh, I don't have to do it anymore. Thank the Lord. And it's so interesting to actually figure out, there's what we think we are, isn't there? And then there's what we actually are. And the knowing, I had so much relief. I was like, oh my God, I've been thinking I should be this thing for years, and it's not
It's
true.
really, it's really interesting. I kind of like I've done those personality profiles, and I am one of these people that's on a cusp of being an
Yeah.
introvert and an extrovert. You know,
Yes. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
I'm in
Yeah.
this scenario, I'm obviously an extrovert. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But the panic and the, you know, I mean, obviously I wrote on, you know, LinkedIn this morning, this is mildly terrifying. And I mean that, you know, I just kind of like, you know, when I do webinars or when I do anything, it's just like
Yeah.
the stress that I go through for the 24,
Yeah.
48 hours before is
Mm.
real. And
Yeah.
it's just driven by a kind of like a, well, what if I'm crap? What if I dry up? What if I do this? What if I do that? You know, and there is that sense of, and similarly, kind of, you know, the whole concept of, you know, there are many things over the last 2 years that I've hated, and understandably so. One of the
Yeah.
things I've loved, networking disappeared. Bloody hell, I hated networking, and I still do. You know, just the thought of actually coming into a room and, you know, and having conversation, you know, starting conversations from scratch with people I don't know. I
Yeah.
was just like, whenever I was at the BBC and I was going to conferences, it was just like, oh God, how late can I turn up before, you know, in between that bit where you get a coffee and the first session starts? How long can I leave it before I can, I mean, A, I want my coffee and biscuits, but B, I want to kind of get out.
Don't really want to deal with people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And unless there's people in there in which I, you know, that I know and I'm friends with and whatever, then I'm happy as a pig in shit. But the
Yeah.
thought of walking into a room where I know no one and starting
Yeah.
conversations, oh my God, the stress. But and that's the thing. So I'm just this bundle of kind of complexity, and it's just, but knowing
Yeah.
it just allows me to deal with it. So now I kind of like, I think, well, if I do need to network, I know, you know, I know what I need to do, and you know, and all of that. But
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is mentally exhausting, definitely.
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it? And that knowing like the career path of which way you then go is massive, isn't it? I mean, it changes everything.
Yeah, definitely,
Mm.
definitely.
So, what would you say? What was the best part of your media career and working in the BBC? What's the best parts and the glamorous parts, and what are the just, oh my God, and this was so boring, and people just don't realise that it's. I mean, you've already kind of said like the hours
Mm.
are just horrific
Oh,
in the sense of the middle of
yeah,
the night, long days, all of that.
yeah, the breakfast show. I mean, it's interesting because, you know, it's in there's a real band of brothers about kind of like, you know, producing a breakfast show, because the people that I consider to be my best friends in Cardiff now are the people that I produced breakfast show with 20 years ago. And
Yeah.
there's no secret in that, because actually we were all 21, 22, 23. You know, we considered somebody who was 32 as being, oh my God, he's old. And, but, you know, and you just don't realize it at the time, but the burnout rate of kind of doing that, because the hours, right, across the course of any given week, right, when I was producing what is now Radio Wales Breakfast, back in the day was Good Morning Wales, right? A normal working week would be maybe start on a Sunday at 4 p.m. and the shift ended at 12. Realistically, you never got out before 2.
Wow.
The following day, you'd start at 2 p.m. and you'd finish about 10, 11 o'clock. The day after, you'd start the shift at 9 a.m. and you'd probably not be leaving until about 7. And then and by the way, that the following day's program was your program, so you never let that, even though you handed it over to somebody, you were always thinking, always looking at the news, always working out. And then the following morning, you were in at 4. And anybody that produces the show now probably thinks it's a lying, because I know they all start at 2:30, 3 o'clock nowadays. But we're back in the day, you started at 4 a.m. in the morning and you worked through until 10 or 11 in the morning. And that was your working week. So you literally kind of gone around the clock effectively. So everybody said, oh, it's lovely, I've got a 4-day working week this week. And I'm just thinking, by Friday, I'm a zombie. I can't do it. You know. So yeah, so there was a lot of that was slog, and a lot of that was unglamorous. But you know, but again, as I say, what made it worth it was the relationships that you built. I mean, obviously, kind of, you know, I mean, just looking at my last job at the BBC, which was running BBC Radio Wales. I mean, the best bits of the job, right, by a country mile, were bits where you could come up with crazy shit and get it done, right? There was one weekend in 2016 where within the space of 24 hours, we had got the fantastic 80-piece symphony orchestra, the BBC National Orchestra of Wales, to sing the songs of the Welsh football fans from the terraces. So we got them kind of singing, we've got them kind of do, you know, the symphony orchestra doing "Ain't Nobody Like Joe Ledley" and Hal Robson Connor, right? With kind of, and yeah, exactly, right? They hated me. But the following morning, we took Amy Watt. It was BBC Music Day the following morning, so we took Amy Wadge, co-writer of Thinking Out Loud, Grammy award-winning song with Ed Sheeran and all of that, onto the Severn Bridge, onto the top of the Severn Bridge to sing live on BBC Breakfast. Kind of like about, you know, building a bridge between Wales and the West Country. And
it's just like, sound up
there. Some very, very, very talented audio engineers.
Wow,
but I just loved challenging the authentic, you know, this is the way that things have always been done, and this is, you know, particularly around kind of things like the orchestra and you know, opera and things like that, right? Because you know, all of this stuff is part of the BBC Wales furniture. You know, if you become editor of the Radio Wales, that stuff you have to do, right? And I'd worked for bosses in the past that just said, right, we just don't touch that stuff. That kind of just gets done and done. And it's just like, no, I don't want to do that, because BBC Cardiff Singer of the World, classic example, right? This is this world-renowned opera competition. We do it, but it's so far off kind of what Radio Wales did on a daily basis that it was just like, yeah, but it's singing. Predominantly it's still singing, right? And I'm sitting here in a meeting listening to you guys tell me that opera singer was a bit rubbish and that one was brilliant, and yet to me they sound exactly the same. So show me the magic, guys, right? So we literally got Wyn Evans and Rebecca Evans, and I kind of to do a nightly show, and I said, right, imagine Jonathan Davis kind of doing the rugby with that magic pen where he's kind of describing kind of, you know, the reason that they passed it to this person is because of that, and just to understand kind of the inner workings of how, you know, a rugby union brain works. Do that with opera. Do that so that actually I can then understand where that person lost it in their vocal performance and where they. And it was just like, the more we could do that, the more I just thought, this hopefully will kind of just bring some of this old kind of established porcelain BBC must not touch stuff to people, so that they can understand it and feel part of it. And I used to adore doing stuff like that, you know, and just
It's so powerful as well to be able to do that and take something like you say that's like grandma's porcelain that no one ever allowed to touch, to actually take it and go, do you know what? We're going to use it. We're going to have it for just a Wednesday lunchtime, and we're going to make it accessible to everyone. And
I was I was very lucky to have kind of a director of the orchestra in Michael Garvey that was willing to go along with that, you know, because actually, particularly with the National Orchestra, as I say, it's kind of, you know, seen as a bit of the crown jewels and all of that. But actually, to be able to go to him and say, right, okay, so Wales 30, England 3, Michael, kind of like great rugby match. Can we set that to music? Can we get Eddie Butler kind of like just doing the commentary live on stage in front of an audience with kind of like, you know, you playing Ride of the Valkyries in the background and stuff like that? And he goes, yeah, well, let's give it a try. And just to have that kind of can-do attitude made a world of difference to be able to do that. So that there was, but yeah, you're right. There was just that bit of responsibility. But I love that. That was so much fun just to be able to kind of just think, right, what interesting and fantastic things can we get the orchestra? Because as much as anything else, I was just really passionate about the fact that I didn't go and see the orchestra when I was a kid.
Yeah.
In Tredegar, you just, I mean, A, the opportunity never arose, but B, it was just not part of anybody's life pretty much. So it's just like,
well, for people listening who are outside of Wales, that, we're talking about mining communities. For those who, the best way to describe it, right, it's the Welsh Valleys where the mining communities are. We're not talking about mainstream city life. And even Cardiff back then was not a big city like it is now. I mean, it's just transformed, isn't it? Over the years, what's happened in Wales and in Cardiff and is just phenomenal. So yeah, I mean, just orchestra, it's like, what?
But a hugely passionate and strong,
massive,
kind of musical kind of heritage, from male voice choirs to brass bands. And, I just thought, there's such an opportunity to bring all this to life and just play with it, kind of just, in some ways contemporize it where needs be and all of that. So I loved all of that. I mean, the bits I didn't enjoy the whole, you were constant. The BBC constantly is in the news, is in public consciousness, because people pay for it in the way that they pay for it's effectively part of taxation. It's not tax, but it works in that same
it may
way.
As well be. You get some pretty stern letters if you don't pay your dues.
And so therefore everybody had an opinion on it. Everybody felt that it was theirs, and as far as kind of the press and the print media were concerned, it was an opportunity to kick it at every given opportunities. So you constantly felt under the cosh, or you felt that the organization was under the cosh, and therefore, depending on how bullish the leadership was at that particular time, where they were in the cycle of getting the license fee renewed and the charter renewed and all of that, then you blow in different directions. But I remember all the way through this, there was a constant challenge to save X amount of money, and every year you had to kind of find more savings. And sometimes you could find it through content cuts, sometimes you could find it through things that just had served their time and all of that. But there were times where you just had to kind of just say, right, I've got to restructure a department now, and I've got to restructure a schedule and have fewer programs. And I did not enjoy that, because you were talking about big departments. You were talking about about 60 production staff kind of, and another 30 presenters and stuff like that. So you were dealing with big numbers, and that's before you threw in news departments, sports departments, and all of that. So I felt there was a lot of kind of constant. I always battled with the fact that I had to be sunny side up about the station as it was right now, while constantly thinking, what was I going to do next, and where was I going to find the money, and all of that. And that bit I found quite emotionally draining. And I did it for 7 years, so by the end I was knackered and I needed a break to do something different.
And where do you think it's going to go now, with the likes of all the internet, well, just the whole world? I mean, even YouTube, right? We're streaming right now on YouTube. I can upload this to Spotify within hours if I want. If I want to, it's almost immediate. Man, woman on the street has got capabilities to do stuff that would have been unimaginable 20 years ago. I mean, even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So how does the BBC, what do you think the BBC is how's that going to work going forward?
I mean, I think that there will always be a place for it. I think there always should be a place for it. I think, I don't think anybody out there is capable of bringing people together in the same way. Whether it be around a sporting event, around kind of, you know, for example, the Jubilee in the last couple of weeks, you know, and stuff like that. There are moments where actually the BBC makes sense to people. And I think actually it's often kind of around radio and the service that is provided to people on a daily basis that kind of just where it's indispensable. It's worth bloody license fee on its own without television, but kind of, you know, it just, people don't think about that. And I think it's under threat, and I think that people will, you know, I mean, it will the way that we know the BBC now will start to ebb away because it will have to, and I think people will miss it when it's not there in the same form, whether or not it's there at all. I don't know. With regards to technology, I mean, I think that is one of the hardest things when you're a massive organization like that with a super tanker. It's just like you're constantly turning the wheel, kind of, but can you turn it quickly enough to kind of go in a different direction? I think they've got better at that. You know, I know a lot. I mean, what it has at its armory. So take, for example, a podcast example. BBC Sounds was created because the BBC needed to change the relationship that young people had with radio. You know, when you know, I think we were roughly about the same age.
I'm 42 this year. So how old are you?
I'm 46, so I'm a bit older than you.
Yeah.
Basically, when
the last generation who grew up without the tech and adopted it early enough that we really get it. I mean, I think it's a really special place to be, actually. I feel really blessed to have both.
Yeah, no, absolutely, definitely. But I mean, I think when, you know, looking back to when I was 15, 16 and really getting into music, I needed Radio 1 because that's where you got your music from. If you're 15, 16 now, you don't need Radio 1 in the same way because you've got TikTok and you've got YouTube and you've got Spotify and you've got all manner of things. And I think kind of, so therefore the BBC needed to create Sounds to kind of put podcast in and all of that on the same pedestal. What's interesting that's happened is that because the BBC has a loyal older audience, it has helped explode podcasting for older generations. So the amount of people that I have a conversation with who say, I listen to podcasts every day on BBC Sounds, you know, it's because they already know the BBC, they trust the BBC, and
so then they,
of radio is new to them in a way that actually kind of, it was, you know, people of a younger age was maybe finding it through Apple or Spotify or anything else. So, you know, I think it really does serve a purpose. It just needs to, you know, be as dynamic as it possibly can while tech is changing in front of our eyes. Basically.
So fast. I mean, and especially with big institutions that have got, you know, I mean, the BBC has actual buildings, infrastructure, studios on a scale that's huge, right? That I mean, Netflix pops up, does its thing, disappears, can do all over the world, all the rest of it. It's almost like this. It's a bit like the new banks that are coming in. You know, the old bank, you know, the big old institutional banks, they can't keep up with a bank that just literally appears and goes, right, here's all the new tech.
What used to annoy me was the whole argument over kind of what the Director General of the BBC should be paid. Because, you know, there was this, I mean, I think it's around £400,000 now, kind of like the director that gets paid, and everybody goes, oh, yeah, I can't believe he's earning twice the amount of the Prime Minister. And it's just like, he's earning a fraction of what the guy from Disney's earning, or the guy from Netflix is earning, and it's just like, you're framing this in the wrong way. He's not a public servant, or they're not a public servant. It's you're running a media kind of banker.
Yeah.
And
so in that sense, actually, the wage is low.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's the same with charities, right? People go, oh, the CEO of XYZ charity shouldn't be paid that much. It's like, why not? Have you seen the size of the company they're running? Like, CEOs in the private sector get paid 3, 4, 5, 6 times more than that. It's such an interesting conversation.
Yeah, no, definitely.
People get really bent out of shape, like they shouldn't be paid that much. In fact, my thought of the week this week was just about that, about the difference between what a doctor gets paid and what a footballer gets paid. And people go, oh, doctors should get paid more. It's like, why? They help one person at a time. A footballer goes on the pitch and is literally serving hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people at one time, keeping them entertained. And it's about it's about value and what people are doing. It's not, oh, well, it's the BBC, so they shouldn't get paid. It's like, why not?
Yeah. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, and I think, like I say, after a while, it kind of does wear you down, where you constantly feel like you're getting kind of chipped away in the media and stuff like that. And it's obviously an easy hit. It's obviously, newspapers have agendas. Of course they do, because they've got to take a position which helps them sell newspapers and all of that. But it feels like a football that gets kicked around quite a lot. And even though I've been out with the organization now for 5 years, I still feel hugely passionate about it. I would go, I was going to say something ridiculous, like I'd go to war for the BBC. I mean, frankly, I wouldn't. But I mean, it's just that sense of, I do feel so passionate about what it is and what it brings. And I just think, kind of, when I hear people criticize it, I just think, just be careful what you wish for, because I think it will leave a massive void if we're not careful.
Yeah. It's really interesting, isn't it? It's like, how do we preserve things like that? I mean, the same happens in food, in farming. The high street's going, and then everyone goes, I can't. There's no fishmonger now. If and being an ex-chef, I'm like, that stuff's important to me. But if you actually look, the fishmongers, the proper bakers, all of that stuff, they're gone. Butchers. I mean, I get my meat from a butcher in Abergavenny, funnily enough. And once it's gone, it's gone. And then we all go, oh, yeah, that's why it was really good. I mean, just the fact that BBC doesn't have advertising on it, for me, never mind the fact the standard of the programmes is actually really bloody high. But it's like, once that's gone, there's no way that comes back. There's no way on earth that comes back. And there's a level to which I think the BBC gives us programmes that people wouldn't make otherwise, to a certain extent. It's that whole world, isn't it? Of it makes things that make a difference.
Yeah, and you're seeing it with presenters at the moment. The fact that now presenters of the BBC get their salaries published. Well, what a surprise when all of a sudden you see these radio presenters leaving the BBC and setting up their stall at Global and all these other places. Well, yeah, it's because they get more money and nobody ever finds out what money they're going to be on. And well, that's fine, and that happens with everybody else, and nobody questions it. So why does it? Why do we kick Gary Lineker around for kind of just earning what you earn so much of the day? It just, I just find it very, very bizarre.
Yeah, well, it's such an interesting, because it's a whole conversation about people's money stuff, right? My whole coaching program, the Money Mastermind that I do, is all about that, because people's sort of beliefs and mindset around money is really misplaced. And it's sad, because it's tragic, because the output then of what happens is that can literally bring down an institution like the BBC, because people don't understand how money works, and they don't get everything you've just been saying, like, yeah, but he's on 400,000, but out there in the commercial world, where you get advertised at and there's vested interests and all of that world, people are on way more. And once, I think societally, on the whole, people don't understand money. They don't understand how it works. There's all of these hang-ups. There's all our childhood stuff, money doesn't grow on trees, and, all of that world. And it really screws us later on, because we then end up with commercial entities with vested interests, and then we don't value things like the BBC, where it's like, to a certain extent, I mean, it's an interesting question, actually, I've got for you around the BBC, around everything that's happening with politics and mainstream media. And I mean, I don't want to go down, conspiracy theory rabbit holes, because I think they are, we could get lost, right? But the general narrative of, can we trust the media? Who's a vested interest? How are people getting paid? Actually, the more we go down a commercialized route, the more you don't know anymore who's paying for what. And the BBC's, I want to say, somewhat protected from that, albeit, I guess, how much does the BBC kind of have to toe lines? Like, when you were an editor, were there things that you were like, we just can't go there? Or, we have to, sort of deal with things in a certain way?
No, you got, so Not when I was, I mean, it was interesting. When I was a station editor, I didn't see an awful lot of that, because a lot of that pressure comes via newsrooms, and, you know, the whole hoo-ha over the Times and the Mail dropping this story about Boris and Carrie Johnson on the weekend because Downing Street had kind of lent on them to do. Well, of course they bloody do. That happens all the time. Now, what the decisions are to drop it, well, that's a different matter. But, you know, I mean, the you know, we've seen director generals resign over things that have happened in politics, and kind of, you know, the ways that things have happened. So we, you know, so that pressure definitely exists. I mean, I think, you know, the one thing I'll say about all of this, because, you know, we're living in this universe where people question truth in the way that we just never did, and kind of, you know, there is the, you know, and nothing is kind of a fact, you know, it's a challengeable thing. But you know, I spent good 5-6 years working in newsrooms, and kind of, you know, and a good 7 years running a national radio station, and in all of my time, never once did I actually was in a meeting just saying, right, how do we bring down the government here, or how do we cover this thing up, or how do we? It doesn't happen. It does not happen. And the fact that people think it happens, I find alien. I don't quite get it. So, you know, you know, that's not, I mean, it's not to say that the BBC doesn't feel, you know, that you know, you only have to watch kind of the coverage of the Jubilee, and obviously the BBC takes a position on the royal family, and that's not everyone's position. You know, there are lots, particularly here in Wales, kind of from surrounding, you know, Welsh football fans, from surrounded by, you know, Welsh Republicans, or, you know, in the terraces and all of that. Well, the BBC doesn't think like that. It doesn't necessarily kind of just mean that you know, it's not going to be, it's going to challenge impartially. It's just, as an institution, it reflects the royal family, and does what it does. So it's just, so, you know, I think, I mean, I just don't see, you know, the conspiracy, I think, is you know, I find it hard. But then, as I say, I have the unconscious bias of having worked in the organization for 19 years. But I you know,
Sure.
it is. I do find some of those conversations quite frustrating.
And I think what I find really interesting, and we're on a platform that does, you know, pull videos down. It's like, how do you, when you're dealing with stuff going out to thousands, tens of thousands, if not even, you know, millions of people, it's like, who makes the decision? Because actually stuff happens so fast, and also things get reported that were wrong, and how do you undo it? It's really hard to undo it, right? But it's such I think it's an interesting conversation going forward, not just for the BBC, actually for platforms like the one we're speaking on right now, where they're not an institution in the way that the BBC is. And we've got this, well, who says who gets to speak? Who says who doesn't get to speak? How do you deal with that? You know, all of that world. So, I mean, it's also a bit of a minefield in you know, managing.
Definitely. I mean, and the one thing I saw kind of in my, you know, in my time there, was kind of, you know, the emergence of social media, and you know, things you didn't have to worry about. I mean, you know, the basic tenets of BBC journalism never changed, in terms of you needed to be, you know, you need to be sure, you needed to be right, even if it meant that you didn't report the story first. You had to get your facts right, and doesn't always get it right, but that was the basic tenet when through the whole thing. It's much harder to do that when there is instantaneous feedback on everything that you do. So if you make a false move, or if you phrase a phone-in question in the wrong way, or you kind of whatever, then, you know, I mean, a couple of times, you know, as my time as editor, I kind of walked into this kind of complete wall of Twitter abuse because we phrased a phone-in question incorrectly. and it's just, and I think then that was in the early days and I imagine whoever's going to do the job next, because they're appointing that person this week, I think, will have to live in that universe kind of in a way that I was only just starting to see the first embers of, really.
And it's vicious, right? Either way, it's so vicious what happens, and that immediate sort of attack and opinion and all of that. It's a huge thing to have to deal with.
Yeah, just the fact that people can feel that they can say whatever they want to say to somebody that they don't know. I mean, it's just it's one of the worst traits of human nature, I think, that because I don't know this person, I can abuse them, and it's just like, oh, grief. Anyway.
Yeah, and that's what there is to deal with, right? It's just it's the same with kids in school. Bullying used to happen in a classroom, person to person, whereas now it's 24/7 online, on social media, within messaging, all of that stuff. It's a huge thing for human beings to deal with. And I think one of the ways that I guess I kind of see it, and how, being a coach and dealing with mindset and humanity and psychology and all of that, some of it's it's fairly basic, right? It's just people being defensive in order to we have to dehumanize people to attack them. Social media does that very well, because people we don't actually know people. We're in communities that are global. That tribal, there's only X number of however many people it was that we would know, and we'd never leave anywhere else. It's all gone. I mean, even comparison, people are comparing. Even as a chef, it's like, I could be the best chef in Cardiff, and yet if I go on Instagram, I've all of a sudden got the best chefs from all over the world in my face with their amazing food. So immediately I feel like, oh, well, I'm useless. And everyone's dealing with that on a level that is just, humans aren't supposed to deal with that. We're not supposed to deal with the fact that there are loads of people way better at us, loads of people that are not as good at us at whatever our thing is that we do. And then everyone's got an opinion on what we just did. I mean, it's massive. And I think for any media company, whether it be the BBC or YouTube or Facebook, whether it's a private company, whether it's Netflix, how you deal with that is just, it's massive. And such an unknown. So I think a lot of it.
And it's easy to kind of say, oh, well, you just ignore it, but it's so difficult. We're not set up as humans to kind of ignore that sort of stuff. No. That's not how it goes. And I mean, we talk about big institutions. I mean, speaking as two parents of kids under the age of 4, I'm slightly terrified kind of at the thought that actually they're going to grow up into a kind of a social media world that all of this stuff is going to happen, and it's going to happen in a way that neither of us have thought about yet. Do you know what I mean? In terms of it's not going to look like it looks now in 10 years' time. It will look completely different. Yeah.
And we can't even go, oh, well, we'll protect our children and we'll keep them away from it, because if you do that hampers them as well. It's really, Kevin Birch is one of my regular podcast guests, and he's a parenting coach, and we talk about exactly this, like how and him and Deepa have just had a baby, and it's like, how do we navigate this shit show? What do we do with our children? What do we say to our children? What do we let them do? And I mean, he talks very eloquently on it about boundaries and timing, and we know that we don't give our kids alcohol, it's just like, you just don't do it. But with social media, it's so new. It's like probably what it was like when alcohol was around initially. Everyone drank, whereas we haven't got to that point now where we're like, oh, actually, do you know what? Children's brains aren't really set up for dealing with Snapchat and TikTok, and maybe we shouldn't have the kids' school groups on Facebook. Maybe we should have them somewhere else.
I've been fascinated watching kind of my daughter's 2, and kind of, her relationship with an iPad, and the difference between that relationship with an iPad and the relationship with television. So she adores CoComelon, could watch CoComelon all day, morning, noon, and night. and I can sing all the songs and and all of that. But it's really interesting, kind of like if she as she occasionally does decides that this morning's going to be an early morning, then I know that 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, CoComelon's on for an hour on cartoony to, right? Great, fantastic. The only problem with that is that every 10, 15 minutes there are ad breaks, and she's going, what's this? I'm sorry, she's so used to having that control of kind of like the next video comes when I press a button or when I do this. And that, and so therefore I'm just thinking, what are we doing to our kids and their tolerance level by just giving them the impression that actually they can
instant. That's what I want. Get it?
Yeah. So I found that really that kind of just struck me kind of like the other week, and I just thought, oh blimey, okay, this is something that we just need to think about, and it's easy to do the whole kind of, oh well, they've got a structured time, and and it's just, but life is life. And I think kind of them having access to an iPad or them having access to a television is as important for their development as other things, but it's just about getting a balance, isn't
it? Yeah, huge. And I think the way, and I'm either naively optimistic, I have it that I'm not. I have a fairly good, I used to be very naively optimistic and think, oh, everyone's just lovely, and then be like, why is this person being so horrible? It's like, okay, that person's not so nice, and there's a whole world of it, and I get why, and childhood trauma and all that. Well, actually, what I really believe about human beings is everyone's just doing their best.
Yeah.
Everyone is just trying to navigate the world, and it doesn't matter whether it's the CEO of Facebook, YouTube, the BBC, whatever, or you and I on this podcast. Everyone's actually just trying to do the best. And at the moment, there's so much stuff going on. Coming out of COVID, and like for me, COVID was just the whole time. I mean, I was pregnant, and I worked from home. My business was unaffected. Owen works for search and rescue, so he was classed as emergency services, so his work carried, we were relatively unaffected compared to a lot of people. I don't go to work in an office, I don't live in a block of flats, so all of that, I just didn't have to deal with it. But like how you manage that, there's a lot of anger, it should be this way, it shouldn't be this way. I've got opinions about really, we should be allowed outside and we should be allowed to exercise, and actually the healthy people should be allowed to mingle. And I also go, and how the hell do you make that decision? If you're in government or you're on the BBC saying, well, what do we say to people? And I think ultimately there's a lot of stuff around where it's like, oh, there's a deep, dark underbelly trying to control us all. I'm like, I think that the truth is much worse. I think no one knows what the fuck's going on. Everyone's just trying to figure shit out.
People who think that give politicians an awful lot of credit. I mean, they on the whole, I mean, even the ridiculous ones, kind of like, I think on the whole, I think there is, you go into politics to do good, generally.
Yeah.
And I think actually presented with the biggest shit sandwich that we've ever seen in our lives, I think the vast majority of people just thought, well, I don't know what to do, and none of us know what to do, but we're going to do the best that we possibly can. So I don't think there was any mass conspiracy, and I think to think that there was that was happening gives, as I say, politicians a bit more credit than I think
is due.
Is due.
They're human beings, right? And if anyone's ever anyone who's ever tried to organize anything and keep it secret will know that it's fairly impossible, right? It's just like, how do you do it? And I think even around vaccination and mandating and all of that, I think, again, and to be really clear for people listening, it's like, I didn't have the COVID vaccine. I don't vaccinate. I don't think it's a thing because I don't do health like that. I have no problem with people who want to have it. I think it's great that we have a healthcare system and a worldwide thing where we go, oh, we need to make sure everyone's okay. I start to have a problem if someone's telling me I have to do something to my body that I choose not to. I think that's a dangerous game to go down. But again, I don't go into oh, everyone's out to get me. It's just like everyone's just trying to do their best and keep everyone safe, and no one wants anyone to die, really. Everyone's just like, how do you do it? How do you mitigate that? How do you manage how do you manage the population? Yeah,
and I think the story of the last, when people come to kind of write about this decade, kind of in years to come, it's just the point at which we all lost our shit with each other just because we didn't understand each other. All we do is antagonize whether it be those who were vaccinated versus those who didn't want to get vaccinated, those who voted leave, those who voted remain, those who voted for Trump, those who voted for. Do you know what I mean? It's just that we are completely and utterly decided, and I do think social media has funneled us in this way, and and because we're addicted to our phones, then that's what's happening. But basically, we've entrenched ourselves in camps. And I think I don't know the way out of it, but I think we've got to get out of it because we can't. And the one thing about the pandemic was that first couple of months where none of us knew what the hell was going on, and it was scary, but we were all in it together. There was that sense of we are in this together. We are kind of, there is this sense of, and it didn't last long. It lasted as long as Barnard Castle and all of that. But the point was that for a time we thought, well, shit, at least we've got each other. And it was just like a glorious little moment, in a decade of nonsense, kind of that this happened. But
I think what we forget as well as a population, and it was actually, this was a video I watched years ago about vaccines and the whole vax, anti-vax, and the best thing I've ever heard about all of it was the guy went, we're all on the same side, we just don't realize it. Everyone cared. This was when they were talking about vaccinations in children and potential damage, not damage, all the rest of it, right? And he went, everyone cares about their children. We're all on the same side. We just do it differently. So some people care by vaccinating and some people care by not vaccinating, but ultimately everyone has got the same interest. Everyone wants everyone to be okay. And it's this weird, I don't know whether it is social media, there's this weird thing where we end up, like you say, pitched against each other. So whether it's leave, remain, vaccinate, not vaccinate, whatever, it doesn't matter. Everyone ends up on the opposing side, whereas actually leave and remain has wanted the same thing. People who vaccinate, don't vaccinate, they want the same thing. And there's this weird thing that happens where everyone suddenly goes in it same, right? Conservative Labour. Everyone wants the same thing. Everyone wants, financial security, good jobs, a workable society, blah, blah, blah. And yet we go, oh, if you vote Labour, you're this. If you vote Conservative, you're that. And I don't know what the answer is. I know what my answer's been. It's doing a lot of personal development, a lot of work, understanding that actually we all want the same thing. How we get everyone around the table to be able to discuss that, I don't know.
We just don't do enough studying of history. We don't do enough looking at kind of, crikey, if they could do it in post-apartheid South Africa, I'm sure we could bloody do it here, kind of. I think it's. As I say, it's kind of it's harder because we're etched into this. Everybody shouting at each other from their own echo chambers type thing. But hey, listen, we've you know what you were saying, kind of like you were terrified about having a conversation with a podcast coach on a podcast and stuff like. We managed to spend an hour and 15 minutes not talking about podcasting
and avoid it completely. And I was thinking we probably need to talk about this next. So and do you know the best way that we can do it is you can tell me what you think about my podcast and I'd love to know. So I would love to know what you do with podcasters, what your opinions about. So talk to me first generally about podcasts, like the different kind, because to sort of part of me is terrified. The other part of me went into this going, I just want to talk to cool people. And it which is why I'm so inspired by Joe Rogan, right? Because actually he started it, there was a load of him and his mates smoking pot, having a laugh. And then they just had conversations. So it was really cool. And that's really my inspiration from it. It was like, yeah, that's really cool. And the connections and everything that's come out of doing this podcast is that it's really powerful for me. And then if it's valuable to other people, it's cool, right? It's a bonus. It's not the reason to do it. So it's a really interesting place, I think, for me to do something from. Whereas in the past, it's always been, when I was a chef, it was like, what do people want to eat, right? There's no, I want it. And there are chefs out there, right, who go, this is what I'm going to cook. And then people go, that's amazing. And they come along. But generally, it was led by what do people want in a restaurant? My business, what do people want? With coaching, what do people need? This podcast is the first thing I've ever done where I've gone, do you know what? I'm going to do what I want and see what happens. And I'm aware that there's a whole world of podcasting that, I've been on other people's podcasts and it's very edited. It's not edited, but it's very timed, and it's very, there's a layer of questions, and it has a format and all of that kind of thing. Yeah. So talk to me first about overview of what you think podcasts are and why you're inspired to work with them now.
Well, I'll come back to that in a second. But in answer to the question, with the kind of work that I do, one of the things that I would say to somebody at the start of training and consultancy is work out what success looks like for you. And no matter what, and I will, happily talk about the podcast and kind of, what I've observed and all of that. But the truth of the matter is, you know exactly what you want out of this podcast. And therefore, it doesn't matter about bloody download numbers, and it doesn't matter about subscribers, and it doesn't matter about kind of retention, and it doesn't matter about all of these things. The truth of the matter is actually talking like this makes you happy. It allows you to make connections. It allows you to kind of just, whatever. The subset of that is it's helping your personal brand as well, and all of that. But it's, you've worked out quite clearly what this podcast is all about.
Okay, yeah.
You'd be amazed about how many people don't do that work, and therefore kind of they then start to get a little bit kind of thing. But I'll come back to that. In answer to the question about why I love podcasting and why what I think is magical about it, I just kind of was I felt like I was having I felt like I was in a marriage with radio and having an affair with podcasting, basically, one day, kind of where I I would, I'd have the radio station was on for 19 and a half hours a day, right? So there's only so much you can consume that. But I just felt like I was sneaking moments here, just listening to kind of like podcasts. Like, so I started on Serial, which if you've not listened to, or if anybody that's watching or listening wants to start on true crime, then it's a few years old now, but Serial season 1 is just magical in terms of the way that it was set up and done and all of that, and I just fell in love with it. And I just felt that this was kind of something that was, it was taking something that we all knew as a format and blowing it to smithereens and starting all over again. And that's what I loved. And then I kind of fell in love with things like, so the New York Times did a daily news program called The Daily. And it was just like, I'd worked in and around daily news for the previous 25 years. And here's a newspaper turning up and doing it better than radio had done it for the last 50. And it was just like, this is exciting. This is different. Things are moving. But I think fundamentally, consumers are in control. They didn't need people like me telling you that you had to listen to something at 11 o'clock in the morning, and then at 12 o'clock, you'd have to listen to something else.
Yeah.
Now, it's different because there's no serendipity in podcasting. You make a conscious decision every time you press play on something.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm listening to Radio 4, I could be halfway through the history of the vacuum cleaner without knowing that I was going to listen to it. I'm enjoying it, might not be enjoying it, but the point is that actually somebody's plonked it there, and you just go along with it. But with podcasting, you make a conscious decision. It is, as I say, it is, Netflix in radio, and I just found that really, really exciting. And when I left the BBC, I think there were about 5 million people kind of listening to podcasts in the UK on a weekly basis. And I remember leaving the Beeb and having a conversation with the director of BBC Wales at the time, saying, do you think there's a future in this? Is this a full-time career type thing? And I'm just going, yeah, absolutely. And I roll off all these stats, and then I walk out of the room and just go, I think so. What am I doing? And by that point, Marina and I had already worked out that A, we wanted to work together, and B, that we were going to kind of just work on podcasting and make it work and all of that. And I kind of spoke to some good friends of ours who were kind of already kind of in this space, and they were saying it's definitely going to grow. And then within 12 months, Spotify and BBC Sounds had entered the market, and 5 years on, because we turned 5 the start of May, and 13.5 million people are listening to podcasts every week here in the UK. You know, there's many people proportionally are listening to podcasts here in the UK as are listening to podcasts in the States. And we always kind of like, you know, bow down to what people in the States are doing because they've always hit the trends first. Well, we've caught up. And actually the innovation within podcasting, production and all of that is on a par here as it is, you know, with what's going on elsewhere in the world. And I think that I think is really exciting. Similarly, people spend time with podcasting in a way that I've just never experienced with other media. You know, the stat that I roll out every time I pretty much do a presentation or a talk or anything like that is of the people that decide to press play at the start of a podcast, 69% of them will listen to the whole episode.
Wow.
That's, I mean, like I said, I mean, you know, anybody that's done YouTube videos or kind of, you know, or whatever, just that level of retention is extraordinary. Kind of, you know, if you're working advertising, it makes podcasting a really exciting place to be. But it also makes it a really exciting content place to be, and it's a real challenge. And getting that right, and a lot of what I talk to people about is just making sure that you're making connections and that you're remembering that actually, you know, there's two of us in this conversation, but actually there's three of us in this conversation. There's you, me, and the person that has their headphones in right now, just walking the dog, that we will never know or never meet. But they're part of this conversation as well, and we can't forget them, and we should talk to them. So, and that's where the intimacy comes from, and that's where the power of podcasting comes from.
So what do you do in the podcasting realm? How do you help people? Do people come when they haven't got a so you do a, you know, checking out someone who's already got a podcast, which I'm happy to have feedback on. So what's your favorite kind of, what is it that makes you tick based on, you know, because your background in radio and everything, what is it that you're excited about when you're working with podcasters, and how do you work with podcasters?
So in different, so basically we're set up to either produce podcasts for or with organizations. We tend to work in what they call the branded podcast space. So we work with companies more than anything else, really, in terms of kind of getting their podcasts to A, start, but B, kind of be interesting and, you know, and different and kind of have their place. And we could do that through literally lock, stock and barrel. So we turn up and we pick the phone up and we fix guests and we get a briefing and write a script and we brief the presenter and then we do the recording and the whole kit and caboodle. Or in a lot of cases, they do that because they know these people and they know what they want out of it. But actually the thought of how on earth do I make this technically work? And once I've got it recorded, how on earth do I edit it? And where on earth do I publish this? And how do I get onto Spotify and all of those things? So we look after all of the technical side of the production for them. So if they've got the editorial and they've figured out the guests, we come in at the point where actually it's just like, could you move that microphone slightly from here to here so that actually, you know, we get something out of it, and then from there. Then on the other side, we do training consultancy for both individuals and also kind of for organizations as well. So we come in and we basically take you from the embryo of a podcast idea, of a premise, you know, and actually kind of turning that into something tangible, making people think about target audience really, really critically, because TV and radio broadcasting, podcasting is narrowcasting. It's about the niche. You know, you could not get a regular returning series on the BBC about financial freedom. They may do 3 items. Do you know what I mean? It may be a bit in a business show or in a finance show or whatever. But it's not going to have that thing. Whereas actually, kind of on podcasting, you can do it, and people will look for it because they are kind of motivated to search for things that they're passionate about. So kind of So I try to kind of just, you know, when the people kind of say, oh, I want to make this a podcast for everybody, I want to make this broad as possible. Don't do that. Make it as narrow as possible. Be able to kind of imagine the person that's, you know, throwing a stick at a dog right now listening to you. Kind of, if you can see them, then actually you've got a real chance of actually connecting with that audience and kind of creating some real engagement. So we talk a lot about kind of, you know, really placing that, and then kind of onto the more kind of, you know, tangible stuff about recording equipment, you know, where do you pick a microphone up from, what do you do, you know, and all of that stuff. And then the road to kind of publication and marketing, because if you press publish, congratulations, you've done 50% of the work. The other 50% is about making sure that people know where it is.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
But yeah, so and then as you mentioned, kind of the other bit of work that we're doing at the moment is health checking, and I that, in terms of kind of where I get the real fire and the passion, and using my expertise, you know, the suitcase with 30 odd years worth of stuff in it, is on that point where actually somebody says, I've got a podcast and it's doing this or it's not doing that, can you just take a look at it? And basically we do three things. We either do a look at an analysis of the editorial, so kind of, you know, what does, you know, give me 2 or 3 episodes, I'll take them apart and just tell you kind of what you need to do to you know, lift the performance. Or look at your stats, look at your user journey, because like I say, it's a what I mean by user journey is, as I say, it's a conscious decision for you to press play. So what comes out of the speakers is one thing, but actually what the artwork looks like, what the title is, you know, what's your series description, what are you calling your episodes, kind of, you know, are you kind of thinking about your keywords, are you kind of like, are you visible when I do a YouTube search for stuff around your podcast, you know? So just making sure that actually that user journey is as clear as it possibly can be. So that's the second product. And then the third product is literally, you know, for a bit more, I'll do it all, you know, and be able to kind of just give you that kind of proper MOT for your podcast and kind of take it from there. So we've done 4 or 5 of those kind of over the course of this year and kind of a bit of last year, and that's so much fun because, as I say, I am literally just kind of in the guts of this thing, kind of just trying
doing what you've always done, right? Because you're in the world of being an editor and making it right and tweaking and doing what editors do, aren't you, when you do that?
Yeah, and it's just, you know, and again, it's everybody wants to make it as good as they possibly can be, but it's just a case of, and in some cases it may be that people haven't heard about this thing that will make their life a huge amount easier, so it's just pointing them in the right direction for that. In other cases, it's kind of just having the wrong kit or having it set up in the wrong way, or kind of just making kind of rudimentary errors about the way that people behave when they're listening to podcasts. And again, that's something that I've just observed over time. You know, I talk in my training about this thing about the golden minute at the start, because if I don't know what your podcast is about, or maybe I've had a recommendation and I'm kind of here and I'm still a bit kind of, oh God, have I got X amount of, you know, have I got 2 hours to listen to Steve Austin's? Probably not. Then I'll press play, and in that first minute, if I don't get all the vitamins and minerals that you've promised me at the start, in terms of this is this podcast and this is what it's about, and kind of, you know, this is what you're going to learn today, and all of that, then I just like, oh shit, okay, I might go elsewhere then, kind of, you know, because again, we're all time poor, we're all creatures of habit. So therefore, kind of, if something is out of your comfort zone and actually it's your only me time, then if it doesn't feel quite right, then why are you going to spend time with it? They're, you know, it's the people that have worked out that actually, if a book doesn't work for you in the first 30 pages, ditch it and move on to something else. Because quite frankly, why are you struggling with something which is meant to bring you joy? So it's just getting those kind of, it's kind of opening people up to those kind of elements, really, and stuff like that.
So come on then. Give me some insights. Hit me with it. We can even do it publicly. I'm unoffendable.
Well, do you know what? And I'm not just
And you
saying.
can tell me to bugger off and that I need to pay you and sign me up as well.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Again, kind of like I'll take my details over here. I've got the notepad. But the I've listened, as you know, I've listened to kind of a couple of episodes because I wanted to do my homework and kind of know what the podcast is all about. I love the serendipitous nature of it. I learned stuff. I learned stuff from Howard Harvey Bowes, and I listened to Lucy Cohen as well. Listened to Peter. And it's just, I mean, it's interesting. You learn really fascinating stuff, and you have a very laid back style and take it in that direction. I don't know that I would. I don't know. I mean, I know I don't have 2 hours at a time. So the question is always, who is going to, what do you want your listener to take away from it, and actually kind of, is it, and a lot of reasons why people are editing down is because basically it's just, and it's certainly in the case of company podcasts, nobody's going to listen to 2 hours on X, whereas they may listen to 20 minutes kind of during a lunch break on something. So again, it comes down to that thing where actually I think if I were looking at this and I would think, oh, he's got a podcast, I don't know that I'm going to listen to 2 hours, but I may listen to the first 20 minutes and I may get real value out of it. So it's more, it would be interesting if we were doing this for real to actually kind of go into your retention rates and understand kind of how long people stick around for an interview. Now, the interesting thing is that you mentioned Joe Rogan. Well, Joe Rogan's the biggest podcast in the world. Joe Rogan as a podcast performed better than anything else out there. So and he does this, and he does it for longer, and he does it on a daily basis. So actually, kind of like, beware of podcast coaches that tell you to do shorter podcasts. But but I always, whenever I speak to somebody who's a Joe Rogan listener, I just say, so what's your relationship with that podcast? Do you listen to the whole thing? Do you kind of listen to a bit of it kind of on a basis? Do you kind of, I've known students who basically have it on in the background while they're gaming, and it's just kind of, that's the way that they consume it. So it may well be that actually kind of lots of people listen, but again, he never publishes his retention rates either. So yeah. So
I mean, I'm assuming they're high based on how much Spotify have purported to pay him, and the deals that he's done. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I listen to the way I choose, and it's really interesting actually having this conversation, thinking about, well, how do I listen to Joe Rogan and why do I, and all of that. So the way I listen to, and he's one of the only podcasts that I listen to, probably because they're so bloody long, and there's not a lot of time to listen to anything else. But so the things that I do is I listen to audiobooks, personal development audiobooks. I read at nighttime. I read fiction. And then I listen to Joe Rogan podcasts. And I also like them. Sometimes some of his guests, I go, oh, they're pretty cool. And they've got a podcast. So Jollock Willink, Jordan Peterson. There's a few other people who I listen to. And there's two things I do. One is I look at who the guest is, because I know I like Joe Rogan. I like his style. I like the way he is. I like all of that. I'm clear, I'm a fan. And so that the way I pick, because there's so many of them, right? He's so prolific. I pick the guests that I think look interesting. So the people I pick tend to be chefs, farmers, military people, and leadership people, because that's what I'm into. So Joe Rogan's kind of like the base. Yeah. And then I pick the people that he interviews that I'm interested in. So farming, chefing, business, personal development, coaches, psychologists. Yeah. Sometimes I listen to the comedians that he interviews because I find their stories interesting, and I actually like comedy. I think we take life way too seriously, and comedy is one of the... Joe Rogan and a comedian is one of the last places where you can just hear normal, funny conversations, which generally out there in the world, you're not allowed to say out loud. Everyone kind of keeps it behind closed doors in case you offend someone. And I listen when I'm on my own. So I listen dog walking. If I'm, even in the shower, putting my makeup on in the morning, and I start at the beginning of the podcast, and I listen to the whole thing. So this is really interesting when you're saying, like, how do you listen? I listen to the whole thing, but in segments, and I just go back to the conversation. So I'll listen for as long, if I happen to be fortunate enough that my husband's got the kids up that morning and I'm having a shower and doing my makeup on my own, I put it on and I listen until I go downstairs, and I pause it. I never listen to it when I can't actually listen. That's really interesting as well. So if I'm doing something else that needs thought, I can't listen to it because it doesn't work. It's not like the radio. It's interesting.
I'm envious of these people that say, "Oh, I'll just put a podcast on in the background while I'm working." I'm just thinking, I can't do that.
I can't do it. I can't think straight. It's like I can't have it on, and I don't have the radio when I'm working either. I don't play music when I'm working. That could be possibly, I went on a silent retreat several years ago for a week, and I hated the first 3 days. And then once I got used to the silence, I actually now love it. And when people started talking again at the end of the week, I was like, oh my God, everyone shut up. I was enjoying the quiet. So
I tend to now, because again, career of working with the radio on in the background, but I tend to now either work in silence, or I work with classical music, or with kind of what they call focus music, the beats, beats and stuff like that. Otherwise, everything else just distracts me, and it's just like I need to make sure that actually I'm concentrating on what I've got in front of me. So
yeah, absolutely. And cooking, that's the other time I listen to it. So if I'm cooking, I'll have Radio 4 on, or speaking of radio, I'll have Radio 4 on, depending on what the program is, if I'm interested. If I'm not, there's stuff that I'm not interested in on Radio 4. Or I'll put a podcast on. But I will listen to the whole thing. And then I will then go, right, okay, what shall I listen to next, and look up the next one. So I guess it's a bit like, I don't know, it's like an audiobook that never finishes in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I've really got into audiobooks in a big way. We produce them as a company, so kind of like it's a bit of a busman's holiday, but I've really kind of.
That's good to know that you produce them, because I need to do my book as an audiobook next year. It's on my list, so we definitely see. This is why this right now, for those listening, we're talking about podcasting. This is why I love my podcast and why I do it, because I know what I'm up to, and then you go, we produce audiobooks, and I'm like, brilliant, that's that solved, tick. And it's the same, speaking to Howard. And he's now put on a finance day for my guys, and we're doing our Christmas party at his property awards. There's something magic about being able to have a conversation for this long, and then go, great, Bob, let's do it. And then the next thing happens, because I haven't got my book here. I'm not in my office. I'm in my wardrobe. That's the other secret to let you into. It's the only small, quiet room in the house. So I come and hide in my wardrobe away from the manicness of our house to do this. But yeah, that's interesting that you do that, because I have no idea how to record an audiobook, but I know that I want to, because I've written my book. It's getting published for this year's course. And then the next thing, my intention was to have the audiobook done this year. And then I realized how much work it takes to write a book, never mind get it published. And then, yes, the audiobook. And
I mean, you are, that's interesting you say that, and kind of that you want to do it yourself, because that as a company is our niche. There are lots of audiobook producers out there that work with kind of big publishers and whatever. We want to work with self-published authors, people who kind of just are, like you, written a book, want to do that, have the rights to the audiobook rights, but have done nothing with it, and kind of, and that for us is kind of, we've just done a fantastic book with a HR consultant called Jenny Field, and just amazing. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, I could probably get her a line of work, kind of doing kind of audiobook narration for other people. It was magical, but again, it just so happened that she had, that she retained the audiobook rights. She wanted to do it herself. She had a podcast, and kind of, it felt like the natural next step. So listening to audiobooks for me started as a bit of a busman's holiday, but I do now. It's the first thing I do in the morning. It's my first.
It's so powerful. I mean, to be able to consume information whilst cooking or having a wash or walking the dog. When prior actually sitting down to read the book, you know, it's just amazing, isn't it?
And I was I've always been a pretty hopeless reader in terms of actually I dragged to it kicking and screaming, even as a child, kind of, I mean, I look at the marks that I was getting in kind of GCSE and A-level English, and just thinking, how did as for somebody that hates reading as much as I do, how did I manage to get that? And also then kind of a career in journalism and writing stuff. But but actually to be able to listen to it, to consume it, is amazing. I have actually read more books that way in the course of the last 6 months than I have in the last 15, 20 years. And I'm not joking. It was really completely revolutionized my reading habits by being able to do that.
And so powerful to be able to do something relatively mundane like driving or cooking or walking the dog or whatever whilst doing that. It's just a really powerful way, I think, of
absolutely. And again, that's another reason why I think podcasting just connects with you, is that if you get it right, if you get it wrong, then then somebody's not going to kind of just give you that intense listening experience. If you get
it's a privilege, right, to have, even when one person says to me, oh, I listened to whichever podcast and it was really great and this was my favorite bit. For me, just one person listening to it, I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Because it's such, to have people's time and attention like that is such an honor.
It's it's just total privilege. Absolutely. And if you think about it, we all kind of, get asked about kind of marketing podcasts quite a lot. And there are things that you can do on social media and stuff like that kind of just will look fancy and help you and all of that. But actually, the most important words in podcasting are never spoken by a podcast presenter. They're spoken by a listener to a non-listener. You have to listen to this podcast. Those are the most important, powerful words any podcaster will ever come across, because that listener likes you so much that they stake their own reputation on the fact that their friends will enjoy this too. That's power. And if you've got that and you can do that multiple times, then not only will your audience start to grow, but it will grow sustainably, as opposed to, I've just launched a podcast, you should go and listen to it, and you might get this big spike and then exactly. So
it's interesting because they say the same about publishing books, that the best way to sell books is word of mouth. I went on the Hay House. I'm in the Hay House writers community and have been on their course, and that's the thing they said. They said, look, you can do everything. You can launch a book, you can make a big hoo-ha, you can do all that stuff. It's all valid, like it needs doing. But ultimately, the best sellers are because people buy the books for other people, or say, this book's flipping awesome, you've got to buy it. And I never thought of it for podcasts. It's ultimately the same thing, isn't it?
It's just a very because it's so personal. Because, like I say, the listening experience is so intense. I mean, this is the other stat that I roll out quite a lot as well. 94% of us listen to podcasts on our own. If you compare that stat to radio, then 52% of radio listeners listen to radio on their own. So for nearly 1 in 2 radio listeners, radio is a communal experience. It's something that
you've got in the background and there's people around. And
whereas people don't experience podcasts like that. Podcasts are about what goes into my earbuds on my phone. That's the relationship. So therefore, the intensity of that is
another level.
Exactly. And if you can engage, understand that and engage with it, then you're into something really, really powerful.
So what would you say? So I love that you said, and I wasn't clear that I was clear about my podcast until you reflected that back for me, because you were like, why you're doing it. I was like, oh yeah, that's probably why it's, why I'm good with it. Yeah, because I'm really clear on the why. So people need to know their why for the podcast. What else do you think are the biggest missings for people around podcasting? I've seen a stat that most people give up after, I want to say 7 or 14 episodes. I can't remember what it is, but most people give up. Is there something about carrying on, showing up, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people kind of experience that pod fade, as it's called, and it is about 7 episodes when people do that's the average before people start to get, is because people have fallen in love with the thought of the numbers,
Okay.
without really being clear on their why and what success looks like for them. You know, the and again, this is another point to talk about Joe Rogan. We know about Joe Rogan. We know Joe Rogan's the biggest podcast in the world. We know roughly how many people listen to Joe Rogan every month because he tells people, right? Because he's got numbers to tell people. But I bet your bottom dollar that 99% of podcasters never tell anybody about their stats because their stats are nowhere near kind of what Joe Rogan gets. And actually, we're not comfortable enough living with the scores, the dozens, the low hundreds, those numbers. And sometimes people just think, "Oh shit, is that it?" And it's just like, and I just say, "Yeah, but think about it this way, right? If you've got 80 people listening to your podcast and you've got a retention rate of 70%, if I said to you, right, you're going to talk for an hour and 80 people are going to turn up, and of that 80, then 65 are going to be there all the way through, and probably whatever call to action you give them at the end of that, a sizable proportion of them will then go into kind of go to your website or follow your newsletter or do whatever. You bite my hand off for it. So it's just kind of repositioning in people's heads kind of what that is. But the other thing that people have is that they have is definition of kind of an idea, because a lot of people actually kind of just think, so I talk about me, right? I'm kind of 46 this year. 30 years ago, kind of Manic Street Preachers launched their first band. They were basically, I had a band from 8 miles down the road on top of the Pops, and I can't tell you how much that blew my mind at the time, right? And so I've been a fan ever since. Now, I could say I want to do a podcast about the Manic Street Preachers. Well, I can join an orderly queue of podcasts there are about the Manic Street Preachers to varying different success or not. I need to kind of take that idea further. I need to give that idea a twist in order to kind of just make it really connect with people, in order for people to think, that's a great idea. That is worth listening to. So actually, if all of a sudden I decided that I'm going to do a single by single review of every single song that the Manics have ever done, firstly, I know that I've got 58 episodes there before I start. Secondly, I have a very clear kind of definition for what those episodes be. 3, it's really easy for a listener to understand what I'm going to do. So therefore, that's either something you're interested in or something you're not interested in. But the point is that you make it easy for your listener to kind of just make that connection, kind of that okay, this is great or this is not. A lot of people just leave it at the, I'm going to do a podcast about the Manic Street Preachers. Let's talk about random, and it's just like, and it just gets lost in a fog. If we estimate, nobody knows for sure, but we estimate that between Apple and all these other platforms, there's about 4 million podcasts out there.
Wow.
All right, if you compare that to the 50 million YouTube channels, it's not very much, and the billions of YouTube videos that go on every day. However, it's still, you're still looking at kind of a universe of about 70 million episodes to sift your way through, right?
Yeah.
What would make me pick you? And getting people to kind of just think about, what is it that I can offer that listener that nobody else can? What problem are they looking to solve? What is it that I can kind of bring to the party? And just getting people to kind of that understanding what this is about is so important. Because if you've got that, and you've got that shape and that definition and that sense of what this is about, it makes it much easier to content plan. It makes it much easier to kind of just start thinking 3 months, 6 months, 9 months down the road, which allows you to be more ambitious, because you just think, right, okay, well, I'm going to start bidding for this person now because I think they'd be fantastic to get on the program. And even if they can't do it for another 6 months, then fantastic, I'll do them then, or whatever. And so on and so forth. And also, as you know, podcasting is a long game.
Yeah.
Everybody starts from an audience of zero, and you
Mm.
build it from that point.
Mm.
So it takes time, and it takes time because it's a trust game, and I need to know that actually spending a couple of hours a week with Alex
Mm.
Louise is going to be worth my time, because she brings fantastic guests, myself not
Mm.
included. But the, you know,
Of course.
to the party. So I just said those words out loud, and I just thought, God, you sound so self-absorbed. But anyway, never mind. But
People who are still listening now will know that you're not really, because they've stayed this long, which means you've been interesting, so they know it's not true.
that's very true. It was the first Gwent Gazette anecdote, and they were out of here. But anyway, but yeah, there's that thing about, you know, I have made a valid judgment about what it is, but it's something that I've built up over time, having listened to different episodes and realized that actually her values chime with my values, her kind of, expertise chimes with kind of what I'm interested in, and so on and so forth. So it takes time, and I think sometimes where that pod fade happens, it's because people think that will be relatively instantaneous. And unless you're a celeb, unless you've been on Love Island for the last 3 months, and even then,
I was going to say, even then,
even then, your next week's chip paper. But it is really difficult to actually kind of just get that dial moving upwards. But it takes time, and it takes engagement, and it takes love of the people that are listening to you right now. If I'm listening to you and you make me feel special, and you make me feel like you've really understood what I need, I am going to tell somebody else who's interested in being financially free. You've got to listen to Alex Louise. You've got to listen to kind of what she's got to say. You've got to, whatever. I've staked my personal kind of reputation on it because I trust you. And all of a sudden that person kind of just feels that, okay, I like you, I trust you, I'll give that a go. But of course it takes time, and it isn't, having your face on a billboard and all of that. That works in a slightly different way.
And I think it's a really good life lesson. When I work with clients in Money Mastermind or Mission Mastermind or Joint Venture Mastermind, especially in Joint Venture Mastermind, which is all about, which is property, it takes time. And we underestimate how long stuff will take. We think, oh, we'll do all of this stuff in a year. Like, I thought I would get my audiobook done this year. The reality is, when I start to do all my milestones, which is what I do with my clients as well, and start to actually go, well, what's it going to take to do that? What's it going to take to have 40 people in Money Mastermind, get my book published, move house, which we're doing in August? When I actually start to put all that in a calendar, I go, okay, we'll record it next year. And people, we don't. Podcasting right now is the thing, but it's such a good thing. If people just had a little bit more patience and a little bit more persistence and stayed in the game for a bit longer, and like you say, didn't expect it to happen overnight. It's such a good analogy for anything we do. Anything that's worth it takes time. I look at my coaching business now, and my oldest group was started in 2017, and it's now 2022, and they're just getting financially free now. They've worked with me for 5 years. And most people go, oh God, that's a long time. I'm like, well, they're retiring. Like, it took them 5 years to get financially free. That's pretty cool. But still, it's spending the time, isn't it? And keeping going at the.
Oh, absolutely. And then you work, it's like I said, we're 5 this year, and kind of, it's only now, and it's only really down to, I do all the public side of Bengo. I'm the kind of, the face, and all of that. But actually, Bengo Media would be a whelk stall if it wasn't for the work that Marina puts behind the scenes to kind of set us up properly. And actually, it feels like now, where we're kind of taking on staff. We've just taken on a producer for the first time this week.
Wow.
And we're kind of, we've instilled our company values. We've kind of, we've set everything up. And like I say, it takes time because you can't do all that stuff kind of immediate. I mean, you don't necessarily know what you don't know until you go through it.
Until you figure it out, right? Yeah, it's that whole like learning, like, oh, who are we? What do we actually want? All of that.
Yeah, but it's kind of, you know, it's now that you just think, oh, well, actually, you know, this is a, you know, we are a growing company and kind of we're moving on in a direction, and actually it's kind of, you know, this feels good. This feels this, you know, that we feel like we're part of kind of a growing, thriving part of media, and that's just really exciting. Really, really exciting.
Steve, we've been speaking for 2 hours. How did that feel? I'm always intrigued by this because most people are like, I'm going to speak for how long? And then we do it and they're like, oh, is it gone? It's that time already.
Well, let's put it this way, right? I'm looking at the clock in the top left-hand corner of kind of the StreamYard, and basically at 37 minutes, I think I was still only 21. So I kind of thought, I don't think this is going to be a problem, frankly. I just kind of 4 hours, not 2. I'm kind of, you know, but no, it felt, it, you know, it certainly didn't feel, it hasn't felt like 2 hours. Probably ask for anybody that's been listening to me whine on for 2 hours.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
We get good feedback from our beautiful listeners.
But no, it's been really good fun. It's been really, really good fun.
And I definitely want to talk to you more. If I had the time, I would sit here for another hour and talk to you and plan my audiobook and learn even more about podcasting. And alas, we do not have the time. Although it does make me thank you for several things today that you've already said. And I do want to speak to you more about podcasting and about audiobooks and about all that world. And we will put in the comments for anyone listening, there will be comments in the wherever you're listening, there will be all of the information. So YouTube, Spotify, Anchor, all of the podcasting platforms will have everything. I've also made a note of the Serial podcast and the MYT Daily, which were your 2 favorite. Any other podcasts as a final thought that are your favorites that you'd like in the links to say to people, these are my favorite podcasts?
I really kind of like Diary of a CEO. I listen to that on a fairly regular basis, but I listen to the moments. So I listen to the 10-15 minuters, and then if I have a plane journey or something like that, then I will kind of, you know, treat myself to something slightly longer. There's a fabulous podcast out there called Doing It for the Kids, which is for people like myself, kind of like self-employed people who've got young families at home who are running their own business. That is just really good fun. And oh man alive, you know that thing where it's just like I'm surrounded by this stuff all the time, and it's just like
putting you on the spot.
Exactly, yeah. I'll talk about one podcast that we've made in recent times. We did a very short series with Sue Ryder, the bereavement charity, last year, called Grief Kind, and it's a series.
What's it called? Grief Kind.
Grief Kind, and it is a series all about how to help somebody going through bereavement. So it's not about, it's not for, this is what I'm talking about, niches, kind of like, it's not for the people who are kind of sort of suffering the bereavement themselves, but for friends or family who are trying to help or trying to understand what they're going through and trying to help. So we're speaking to celebs kind of about, you know, what that grief experience was like and how their friends and family helped and what connected and all of that. I mean, there's some beautiful interviews there and really, really powerful stuff. So yeah, so there we are. One of ours.
Oh, cool. Even better. I was going to say that sounds awesome. I'm going to listen to that one. It sounds really interesting. Having lost my brother in a cycling accident when he was 28, it's a passion project. You know, that's really close to my heart because it's such a huge thing. And having, you know, I know people who, if you speak to them about the person that's died, it's like it happened yesterday. And I'm really clear that, you know, everything with my brother that happened, I'm really complete on it. And I think it's quite rare. Like, grief is such a huge thing and it's so consuming, and it doesn't just go away. if the situation isn't dealt with on a kind of psychological mindset, you know, being at peace with it, however you want to call it, if it's not dealt with, it doesn't go away. And I know, you know, I know people who have lost people who, if you speak to them about it and you ask them how they are, it's like it happened yesterday. They're right back there with all of the pain and everything that there is. So that sounds really interesting. So I'm gonna listen to that one. That's fabulous. Steve, thank you for your time and your attention. I always feel honoured when guests come and speak to me for this length of time. I'm aware how busy you know you are, and you're a dad of a 2-year-old and all of that. So I really thank you so much for your time and for your, you know, sharing and talking and everything. And I know we'll speak soon about audiobooks and all the rest of it. It was a real pleasure having you on. And if anyone wants to contact you, they can do, presumably through your website and stuff. We'll put all the links in. So aspiring podcasters, existing podcasters, podcasters who have lost their way, podcasters who want to know how they do better. It sounds like you can serve and help all of, I'm going to say us in this, because there's certainly some questions I've got for you after this that I'll follow up with you. So thank you so much. And thank you for listening, everyone. It's been a pleasure as always, and we'll see you next time.